In the previous engagement between the Death Guard and the Iron Hands, there was a clue uncovered that in fact was a locator beacon that was directing the Death Guard to the other side of Spidonius. The landscape was much different. Instead of a fiery landscape, it was more of a frozen tundra that was in fact caused from a nuclear winter, where nuclear waste would rain from the clouds. Both sides have sent for reinforcements. The Iron Hand has sent word to the strike cruiser overhead, and a Thunderhawk has been scheduled to meet the ground forces, which are tracking the current Death Guard movement. A Razorback, an Apothecary, a Tech Marine, and a Storm Talon have joined the campaign for the Iron Hands. A small Death Guard force has been traveling through the wastes, has joined up with the current warband, which now is traveling to its new location. The Lord of Contagion, a Plague Marine squad, a Plague Surgeon, a Chaos Spawn, and a Plague Crawler now strengthen the current campaign forces. The battle will take place over center ground on this nuclear tundra. There are 4 objectives that are surrounding an old temple, and each force has been instructed to perform an action to access a key objective to see if there is any entrance to the temple and what may lay inside. The Death Guard have a second agenda, which is to secure the area, while the Iron Hand's agenda is to make sure the Contemptor survives the battle, as he has fell in the last 2 engagements. Both of these armies meet again, and the Iron Hands have decided to deploy all units on the battlefield in hopes of striking first. The Contemptor did deploy behind ruins as not to be an early target. The Death Guard deployed most units on the battlefield, and in the Rhino was the Plague Caster and the new 5-man Plague Marine unit. The Rhino and the Spawn deployed forward as to get close to the main objective. The rest of the units deployed back to secure the rear objective. The Lord of Contagion was going to teleport onto the battlefield as an important reserve unit. The Intercessors moved forwards towards the key objective and shot at the Plague Marines, killing 2. The Contemptor moved up towards the middle of the battlefield and shot all of its guns into the Spawn that was lurking in the ruins, killing it. The Storm Talon flew to the left side to support the Razorback and the aggressors. All of those shot at the Rhino, which lost 2 wounds, and the Las Cannon shot at the Plague Burst Crawler, which in the end lost 4 wounds. The Plague Marines and the Plague Caster disembarked from the Rhino to secure the objective. They proceeded to do the mission to action to secure the center ground. A cloud of flies surrounded the Plague Marines. The Plague Caster tried to cast Smite and did minimal damage to one aggressor, and then cast Miasma Pestilence onto the Plague Marines. The Rhino moved up to put itself between the Plague Marines and the aggressors and used its smoke launcher. The Plague Zombies moved up slightly to secure the rear objective. The Plague Surgeon moved to a position where he could support the Plague Zombies and the advancing Plague Marines. The Plague Burst Caller moved up and fired its Plague Burst Mortar at the aggressors with no success. The Plague Marines, known as the Blightbringers, advanced up closer to the other middle objective and fired on the Intercessors with no success. The Blight Hauler, known as the Undying, moved up to provide cover to the advancing Plague Marines and fired into the Intercessors, killing 1. The aggressors stood still and fired into the Rhino, doing 2 wounds to it. The Apothecary stood still and healed the wounded aggressor for 1 wound. The Razorback fired its twin las cannon at the Plague Burst Crawler with no success. The Storm Talon flew across the battlefield to the Death Guard deployment zone and fired everything into the Plague Burst Crawler, destroying it. The Intercessors moved up to secure the middle objective and fired onto the advancing Plague Marines, killing 1. The Contemptor moved back over to support the Intercessors and fired onto the advancing Plague Marines, killing another. The Plague Zombies and Plague Surgeons stood back to claim the rear objective. The Plague Marines that completed the mission objective moved onto the temple to complete the Death Guard agenda, and a cloud of flies surrounded them. The Plague Caster moved closer to the middle objective and cast Smite on the Storm Talon, and then cast Miasma Pestilence on the Rhino. The Rhino moved up in front of the aggressors to provide protection to the units behind it. The Lord of Contagion arrived from reserve in a flash and then proceeded to start the mission action of securing the center ground. The Blight Hauler turned his sights into the Storm Talon. After firing everything at it, it was reduced to 6 wounds. The Plague Marines moved up closer to contest the middle objective and shot at the Intercessors, killing 1. They then charged the Intercessors, doing no damage, and in return, the Intercessor Sergeant killed a member of the Plague Marines with his Thunderhammer. The Contemptor moved back over to support the aggressors. The aggressors moved up and fired at the Rhino, removing a wound. The Contemptor fired at the Rhino, removing another wound, and the Razorback fired at the Rhino with no success. The aggressors then charged the Rhino, destroying it with their fists. The Storm Talon moved over closer to the Plague Zombies and split its fire. It fired at the Blight Hauler with no success with its las cannons, and then fired at the Plague Zombies with its assault cannons, killing 2 models. The Intercessors fell out of combat and left the Plague Marines open to be shot by the Tech Marine, who killed them with fire and plasma. The captain tried to charge the Blight Hauler, but could not make the distance. The Plague Zombies moved up towards the temple in the middle of the battlefield. The Plague Surgeons stayed behind to hold the rear objective. The Blight Hauler moved closer to the Intercessors, then split its fire and fired the Bile Spurt into the Intercessors, killing 1, and fired the Missile Launcher and Multi-Melta at the Storm Talon, reducing it to 1 wound. It then charged the Intercessors, and neither party was able to do any damage. The Plaguecaster held the middle objective and tried to smite, but suffered perils of the warp. It then started the mission center ground action. The Plague Marines moved up with the Lord of Contagion closer to the aggressors. Their shooting was able to kill 1 member, and then they charged the unit. The Flails of Corruption proved to be the end for the aggressors. The Storm Talon flew off the battlefield and into strategic reserve. The Intercessors fell back out of combat from the Blight Hauler. The captain then moved closer to the Blight Hauler and charged the demon engine known as the Undying. The captain swung his Thunderhammer but only did 2 wounds to the demon engine, and in return the Blight Hauler did a wound back to the captain. The Contemptor moved closer to the Plaguecaster, his arch-enemy. He decided to shoot his upgraded auto cannon at the Plague Marines, as he wanted to use his fist to tear the Plaguecaster apart. 3 Plague Marines fell in the hail of bullets. The Contemptor then charged the Plaguecaster and in the end left him with 1 wound left. The Tech Marine moved closer to the Razorback, and with all shooting from his servo harness, he was unable to fell the last 2 Plague Marines. The Razorback fired its twin las cannon short range at the Lord of Contagion, killing this leader before he got to taste any defeat by his own hands. The Plague Zombies moved up into the temple in order to complete the Death Guard agenda to secure the area. The Blight Hauler stayed in combat with the captain and fired its ranged weapons at him because big guns never tire. In the melee, Captain ended up removing 4 wounds from the demon engine, and the Blight Hauler was unable to do any damage back in return. The Plaguecaster fell out of combat from the Contemptor in hopes he could survive longer and still contest the objective. The 2 Plague Marines moved up closer to the Tech Marine and Razorback. They then shot and threw a grenade at the Tech Marine with no success. They then charged the Razorback, removing 2 wounds from the vehicle. The Contemptor had not lost sight of its prize and moved in closer to the Plaguecaster. He looked towards the temple and decided to shoot his autocannon at the Plague Zombies, killing 1, and then charged the Plaguecaster and crushed him in his fist, feeling vengeance for the first 2 encounters. The Razorback fell out of combat with the Plague Marines. The Tech Marine then killed 1 of them with his shooting from his servo harness. The Apothecary then shot his pistol at the unit but was unable to fell the last member. The Storm Talon came back onto the battlefield from strategic reserve and shot his autocannon at the Plague Zombies, killing 2, and then fired its las cannons at the lone Plague Marine, killing the last member. The captain, in a fit of rage, tried to fell the one called the Undying, but true to its name, he remained alive after the melee and was even wounding the captain again. The last 2 Plague Zombies moved up onto the temple to once again complete the agenda of securing the area. The Blight Hauler did not fall back out of combat, instead shot the captain and killed the Iron Hands captain. This allowed it to then charge the Intercessors. A plague surgeon had been quietly moving up, and once he saw the captain die in a melt of fire, he knew he could then charge the intercessors. The hunger for knowledge of the Primaris organs was his steely focus as his bale sword cleaved the unit. He now could harvest what he wanted from these monstrosities of the false emperor. With the victory in the Death Guard's hands, it was the Iron Hands that had to leave the battle again in defeat. The Death Guard were now aware of where the relic would be for their next mission. It was unnoticed by the Death Guard that one lone servo skull was left behind to learn of the Death Guard's plan. With the clues that the Death Guard have found so far, it is not certain, but believed that this relic that they are searching for is a forgotten technovirus that was used to merge man and machine, or in hopes, demon and machine. Due to their ability to secure the area, the Plague Zombies now gain the battle honor fleet of foot. The Blight Hauler gained a fitting battle honor for one known as the Undying Repair Systems. The Intercessors gain a Purity Seal as their battle honor in hopes that this can help in their psychic defense.